Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the Fully Managed podcast. Thank you, Doug, so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. So, please start by telling us a little bit about yourself. We already had a nice conversation before the podcast, but I want the audience to hear about you, what you're all about, and what you're doing today.
Okay. Well, my name is Doug Jessop, but it wasn't when I was born. It's a really long one, and it's got a weird story behind it. But let's just say I had a tumultuous childhood, and there was one person that was my go-to person, the person that had my back, and it was my grandfather. And when I was 12 years old, okay, now I'm going to date myself because I'm going to tease you here, Shannon. There used to be a thing called a cassette recorder, okay?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay, I'm 12 years old and I get one of those for Christmas. And I'd love to interview everybody. And my grandfather was very patient with his little ADHD grandkid before they knew what it was, and bouncing off the walls and everything. But he told me stories that were incredible that my mother didn't even know. Come to find out that he had been a chauffeur in Hollywood during the Depression. It's like, whoa, cool. And he was a really fancy dresser. And when he passed away, I inherited a pair of his cufflinks. Well, I'm the guy that wears hats on TV. And so I had a special hat made called the George. The last words that my grandfather said on this earth were when I was 19 years old. He said, "Please remember me." That is the reason I'm a broadcaster. That's the reason I've been doing this for decades, because to me, if stories don't get passed down from generation to generation, they're lost. And those people are forgotten. And bluntly, I made a promise. And so, it's funny. When I started my career, I kind of, I was in radio for 10 years and I've been doing television for decades, let's just say. Okay? And it was interesting. I remember when I started in my career, I basically kind of perceived myself as a storyteller. Not so much. As I've gotten older and I've gotten into things, my whole role is not to tell my stories. Mine is to help other people tell their stories. And it's funny because so many people say, "Oh, I don't have a story." No. No, you do. And the other thing is, quite honestly, sometimes things get, shall we say, a little divisive in this world. And I strongly believe that if you just sit down with someone and listen to understand instead of listening to respond, that you're going to find out you have a lot more in common than you think you do. So that's, in a nutshell, how I kind of got into this thing. How's that?
I love that. No, and I love the story about your grandfather as well, because I definitely resonate with, especially with grandparents specifically. It's something that I think we run into often where their stories and knowledge isn't valued because they're of a certain age or something like that, and I never understood it. And it was something that I always wish that I had more of because my grandparents were not alive when I was younger. And it's something that I hold so dear, like just my parents' stories about them, because it's like how I know them. And I'm so happy and grateful that they have that. But it's not always something that everyone has. Like the stories that you get to, like, you learn about yourself from hearing that stuff too, is like, it's something that you can reflect on and, understand, like, and have some kind of community with, like, oh, I have this, I'm exactly like, my great grandfather's brother, and I didn't know anything about him, but that makes sense. That's where that's where it comes from. And it's so lovely to learn something like that.
Well, the other thing that's interesting, it's not just necessarily the rosy, wonderful, la-di-da stories. A lot of the time, it's the stories like, for example, your family immigrated from where?
Ireland,
Ireland. Okay.
mostly.
There's 99% chance that there's a reason that they came here. No, and it's probably not necessarily because things were great and wonderful and hey, let's go to America. It's, maybe it was a potato famine, maybe it was whatever it is. It's those stories of challenges of being able to, how did grandma or grandpa or great, 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 whatever, get through all this stuff? I mean, because we have so many wonderful tools at our disposal. And yet you think, okay, you could fly to Ireland today from New Jersey and be there tonight. Okay. For them, it was probably weeks on a ship that may or may not have had a heck of a lot of engines on it. It's just like, so the things that our ancestors have gone through, because to me, stories from the past can help shape the future.
Yeah, it's something that you have the ability to learn from in so many different ways, not only things that excite you, but also something that can help you maybe get through your own hardships as well, like inspiration in a way of what if my ancestors or my family was able to get through something like this, then I can get through, this. And
Exactly.
I love those stories because it's something that you can relate to more because it's someone related to you that did something that you probably could view as impossible. But you're here, so clearly it was.
Well, to me, and this is kind of the big phrase that I use and have for many, many years, Shannon, it's the power of stories. So let me give you a couple examples. So it was interesting. I was doing a news story, and it was basically on the high cost of adoption versus IVF and all that kind of fun stuff. And what happened next was kind of crazy. So I met with this one family. They were told, okay, realistically, you're probably not going to be able to conceive children on your own. Okay. They did, but they tried the IVF, they tried blah, 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 blah. Okay. They says, well, maybe we ought to do the adoption thing. So they started getting on the list and everything. And lo and behold, gosh, they found out they had a little miracle baby on the way on their own. It's like, wow, cool. And so the little baby came and everything. But then, it's like, okay, we want to keep trying to figure out this adoption. And it was interesting because they also felt, just weird sidebar here, but they felt kind of funny because when you are doing an adoption, they ask all the different things. Will you accept a child that has special needs? Will you accept a child that is of a different color? Blah, 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 all this stuff. And so it was intriguing. And they had an open adoption, and it was with a woman that was from back east somewhere, and was of a different color. Yeah, so what? But anyway, so they have this adoption. They were there. Everything was cool. And they wanted to make sure everybody was in contact because they wanted that same thing, like you said, about that familiar context, knowing where you come from.
Yeah.
Well, the birth mother kind of disappeared. And so it's like, oh boy, and this child, I think he was probably close to 2 years old when I interviewed him, in the family and such. So I put that together, ran the story, and then it got picked up, with some of the other TV stations across the country in our group. And it was weird. About a month later, after the show aired, I get a voicemail. Okay. Hello, Mr. Jessop. I'm so-and-so. I saw your story on so-and-so family. I've had some problems. I'm the birth mother. I'd gotten my life back together. I've got a new phone number, blah, blah, blah. Would you be, could you please pass this on? I'm going, you got to be kidding. And so here's the story in Utah. This lady was at the time in West Virginia.
Ah,
And, and so I went to the family, and oh boy, yeah, that was a cry fest, because they were excited to be able to have that connection. And so again, the power of stories is just incredible.
yeah.
But you get to hear all kinds of stories. We both do. What do stories mean to you?
Ooh, that's such a loaded question. We're interviewing back and forth. We're
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm sorry.
No, I
It's
know.
my habit, but
No,
yes.
I appreciate it. No. It's fun. It's a good conversation. Stories for me. I think that it kind of explains why someone is the way they are. Like, I think that sometimes that specific thing that they're sharing doesn't explain, like, some of their parts kind of thing. Like, it's not necessarily the whole person or an
Mm-hmm.
explanation for a specific thing, but the amount of times in which I've heard a story that has changed my entire perspective on someone, like, for good or for bad, of
Oh, yeah.
why I'll give you an example. So
Okay.
my dad has Asperger's syndrome, which is not necessarily a thing that they diagnose it anymore. It's like on the spectrum, I think, now. But for the longest time, I didn't connect with him well emotionally because I didn't understand that that was something that was about him. I understood that he had it because my mom told me that, but I never understood what that meant or why. And I remember taking psychology in high school and hearing a story about someone that had that same thing and was categorized in that same category, and just finally understanding how his brain worked. And for the longest time, I thought that he just wasn't trying to relate to me or wasn't like understanding, like wasn't what didn't care, like because it was hard to understand his perspective on things and like why he acted the way he did and certain things. And it really just put into perspective of how much he did care. He just did it in his own way. And that was a story about another person that taught me about him, like, and I think that that's something that's really gratifying too, is hearing a story that teaches you about your life that isn't about your life, or puts into perspective just that this shaped someone. And I think that's something that's really wonderful, is just learning from stories in general.
Totally agree. I mean, because for many years, I had a television show called Jessop's Journal. Yeah, go original name, right? But and the tagline on it was, "Everyone has a story. Stories have power. They help us understand each other." So now with Family Heritage Stories and the Fedora Foundation, which is my nonprofit, let me kind of explain how that came to be.
Yeah, tell me more.
Basically, I was with the largest broadcast group in the entire country, and let's get real. I'm a guy of a certain age, and so I was doing my own show and everything, and they were making some changes and blah blah blah, and so I decided to kind of go in and do little semi-retirement type stuff. And everybody around here knows who I am, and so it's like the name, yeah, whatever. So I wanted, for lack of a better term, to give back, do more of a legacy thing. And so I'm saying, hey, I've got access to a studio. It's like, okay, if you got somebody, especially, kind of thinking my grandfather's age and, retirees and blah, 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 here, contact me. We'll arrange, we'll do a private interview, not necessarily designed for TV. It's like, okay, here, and I'm going to, and the idea is to give you a copy because I mean this in the politest of terms, but okay, there's a lot of people that will write books about their family and, their life story and yada, yada, yada. Shannon, when was the last time you picked up a book? Okay. I mean, I'm teasing, I'm
I read
teasing.
so much book. I books
Okay.
actually. I read. It doesn't sound like I do because I just use
Yeah.
entirely improper grammar to
Right.
describe how many books I read,
You,
but
you,
not
yeah.
necessarily about someone's very particular family.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's like, okay, and so basically the whole idea is I'm going, okay, my kids and grandkids are not necessarily reading books, but they're spending a lot of time on devices. And now, granted, I've been in TV, and so it's video, and I've been doing it for decades. And to be able to see and hear, I mean, imagine, okay, it's kind of like, okay, you didn't know your grandparents. What would it mean to you if you had a video of them in their voices, in their words? You're seeing them talking. That has an emotional appeal, And so I'm going, let's maybe I'll offer up some private interviews. Well, here's what happened, and it's kind of a semi-long story, so bear with me. A lady calls me up and says, "Hey, Doug, it is my husband's turn for his reunion of his old military group." Okay. They're only here for 2 days. They're flying in from all over the country. Is there a way you could interview all these guys? Yeah, sure. So I arranged, made, what it's like. You had to pull a bunch of strings and get everything figured out, and it's there. So she didn't give me a warning as to how big of a deal this really was going to be. I still kind of get emotional about it because these guys are now what I affectionately call my big brothers. There were 6 guys. They served together in the Vietnam War. They were members of a very, very special group called the 159th Dust Off Medical Evacuation Helicopter Pilots and Medics. Every single one of these guys had served over 1,000 missions, flying into enemy areas under fire.
Oh my goodness.
Every single one of these guys had saved over 3,000 lives. And then here's the crazy part, Shannon. As one of these guys said, yeah, well, they took the guns off their ships so that they could get 3 more patients on. And then, as one of the guys teased, they painted a little red X on our ship, the Red Cross, so that people could do target practice. It's like, it's like, wow. 2 of these guys were Purple Heart recipients. This is the crazy part. The woman that had arranged it, her husband, he was one of the Purple Heart recipients. She had never heard the full story of how he got his Purple Heart, but he told me. I come from a military family, and so I kind of have I have to admit, I'm still amazed what people will tell me. I guess I'm a therapist or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
but, and so then what happened after those interviews, got some pictures together and everything. And I said, okay, guys, this was not intended for TV. And it has to be unanimous, but I would really love if you could give me permission to use these videos to make a television special. And they did. So I went to the TV station and said, guys, I need a really special time slot. I'm going to do this particular thing. I'm even going to pay for it. And so they gave me, we worked out some deals and put a time slot on Sunday nights right after the sports, right after, news and then sports and then us. And so I kind of came up with a name and going, okay. And we aired it. And it went national. It went crazy. And here's the funky part. Within about I'd say about a month. Okay, you got to remember, Vietnam was 60 years ago. Within a month, I got 3 different people making comments and sending comments. And so I had to call the guys. The news side of me says, okay, yeah, are these real people type thing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the guys in the group confirmed it. And so I'm going, oh my gosh. The comments were, that's the guy that gave me my training the first day I came in Vietnam. He's the reason I came home alive. That's the guy that rescued me. I served with these guys in Vietnam as well. So we tracked these guys down and we flew them out and did interviews with them as well. And so, and then it happened again later, but of these 6, with these 6 interviews, we found 4 other people that had served in their unit 60 years ago. What she didn't tell me is that every single one of these guys has got an expiration date because they were all exposed to Agent Orange. Every single one of them have cancer. And so I started the Fedora Foundation to help fund it so that, I mean, I self-funded the show and everything, but I want to make sure that with Family Heritage Stories and the Fedora Foundation, our mission is to help heroes and heritage be remembered through stories. Because it's changed my life. I mean, like you'd said, stories. And I've been in broadcasting for a lot of years. And this is the one that's like, oh, you got to be kidding, because here's what's happened since that. So those interviews we started the television show, and it's familyheritagestories.org. And then the funding site is fedorafoundation.org. We've got our 501c3, all the yada yada. But the idea is that we did these stories, and now we want to be able to help other veterans as well. But there's a thing called honor flights. You familiar with those at all?
No, couldn't.
Okay, honor flights are things that, it was interesting, it was set up a number of years ago for veterans, and it would start with World War II veterans. So to fly to Washington, D.C. to get a tour of all the stuff and everything. Well, then it became really, really big with the Vietnam veterans. So they're getting Vietnam veterans, and each of the states have their own little groups, and they fly them for free, because they're nonprofits, to Washington, D.C. to visit the Vietnam Veteran Memorial. Whew, talk about emotional.
Yeah.
But the thing is, every single state has got their own thing, and bluntly, they don't usually mix. Well, here's what's crazy. And I keep saying that, I know, but one of the guys calls me up. He's in Kansas City. He says, Doug, the people here at the Kansas City honor flight people saw the television story, saw our show, because we put it online and on our website. But I'm on my way right now to go on an honor flight. And then he sends me pictures a day or two later of him laying a wreath on the tomb of the unknown soldier in Washington, D.C. So then I contacted the folks with the Heartland Honor Flight in Kansas City, and says, okay, guys, I know this has never been done before. I know every single state does their own thing.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be cool? I mean, these guys don't have much longer on this earth. Wouldn't it be cool if we could get all of these guys from 6 different states to go on the same honor flight as a unit to Washington, D.C.? And again, it took some string pulling and everything, but I'll be darned. We pulled it off. And these guys are special. Then the probably the biggest tip thing that was really neat, and again, it's not my stories, it's their stories, and that's the beauty of being able to help share other people's stories. Come to find out that there had been a lobbying group trying to get these guys the Congressional Gold Medal, which is the highest honor in the nation. And it started with George Washington. So, but there's not a heck of a lot of them. The lobbying group used our videos to help show members of Congress. And I'll be darned, in July of last year, was signed into law that the 159th Dust Off Medical Evacuation Helicopter Unit was given the first Congressional Gold Medal of anyone that served in Vietnam. Wow. The power of stories. That's what it's all about.
That is so beautiful. That is the impact that had, not only on the lives of all these people, to be able to meet people that not only they saved, but that they had community with during that time, and to be able to reconnect with them is such it is such a wonderful opportunity that you were able to do, that you were able to accomplish. I'm amazed by the ability for this to happen. It reminds me a lot of, like, even just the idea of ancestry, like, in general, like how many people and like families have connected through something that seem to just, want to learn more. And I think that it's just the impact of being able to share a story, and how wonderful that can go, and to be able to have that impact on different people. And even if they're not alive anymore, to be able to hear about that and maybe understand something more about, like, a relative or something that was in that time, or was in that war, or was even related to this group. That's just absolutely wonderful. And to have that be the inspiration of continuing to do this, I completely understand why you'd want to continue to do this.
I mean, it's just, it's mind-boggling. It's like every time I tell the story, I still get goosebumps, because I'm going, you have got to be kidding.
Yeah.
It's like, really? And it's happened so many times, and the cool thing is then, one of the gentlemen passed away recently, and that was a tough one. And the rest of the guys flew in here, and we all got together and had some stories and everything. And it was interesting, come to find out that the Kansas City folks are now using these guys' stories in the high schools and junior highs in Kansas City to help give people a feel for somebody that was there. And it's just amazing, because the whole idea for the television show is to say, especially for the people, oh, I don't know. No. Yeah, you do. But the other thing is, we're just here to give you ideas and examples of how to help tell stories. Yeah. So, we do the hero salute stories is the first story of every show. And admittedly, okay, I am going to put you on the spot. Yes, I know I'm not the host, but my favorite question to ask people all around the world, because everybody's got an answer. Tell me a story about one of your grandmas or grandpas.
You're gonna like this one, I think. My mom loves telling this one about my grandpa. I have never met him, but I think I'd really like him. Sorry, I'm already getting emotional thinking about him. Sorry. So it's funny, because this story is funny, and it just shouldn't be getting emotional.
I've heard all kinds.
But so when non-American made cars were introduced and becoming more popularized, my mom got a Toyota, and my grandpa, her dad, was not very happy about that, as you would know, you would understand. There's a lot of
Mhm.
prejudice and different things, especially towards Asian brands at that time specifically. My dad didn't even my dad didn't even like Polish people, and they were just because they were Irish, and there was all these differences at that time, um, and he there was something wrong with my mom's car, which is, God forbid, a Toyota. That never happens. And he had to switch cars with my mom that day because she had to get to work and he was much closer. And he worked at a mechanic at an auto body shop.
Ooh, okay.
And he drove to work, and these men made fun of him so much. One, because it was not only a Toyota, but it was also a girl's car. So it was beyond repair. And I just think about this, like, I've seen pictures of him, like very burly, like very
Yeah.
stereotype man's man driving this Toyota into work and getting made fun of by all of his coworkers just for his daughter, and
Oh, yeah.
and I always think about that because it just, makes me think about when you really, are a man, you don't care about, that kind of whatever ridicule or whatever you're going to make fun of for, because, doing a favor for your daughter is more important. And that like shapes kind of what I think about him and, how wonderful he must have been.
Well, and I mean, as a father and a grandfather, I mean, it's one of those things where, yeah, I admit, okay, you don't have favorites, but your girls kind of, it's like, okay, they're rough, and they know it. They know it. It's fine. Okay, I get it. But the other things that we get into occasionally, well, we always do. Remember where you came from. That was the mantra that was kind of buried into my soul as I was, in my upbringing. And then we also do, and so we're going to have some fun with you on this one. One of the things that I love is you learn a lot about traditions, values, and culture when you travel. So if I were to interview somebody like Shannon with like a Shannon O'Shannon name or something, I'm pretty sure we would feature Ireland. Okay. And let me tell you the story of how that started. My grandfather, again, he was a man. He was my rock star.
This is beautiful because I was going to ask you to tell me a story
Oh
about
yeah,
your grandparent in return.
this one's a heavy duty one though. Okay, just be
That's okay.
aware.
Not the Toyota story.
No, he was a first generation American. His parents, and I won't tell you the country because this is where I'll tell you the country in a little bit. Okay, but it kind of, as much as things change, they stay the same. Okay, so keep that phrase in mind as I tell you the story. So it's the turn of the century, of the last century, okay, the early 1900s. And his parents immigrate and they end up in a suburb of Chicago called Oak Park, Illinois. That's where my grandfather was born. When his mother was 8 years old, she died from a burst appendix because they could not afford a doctor. So now he is an 8-year-old kid with his dad. Okay, his dad's a single dad now. When my grandfather was 12 years old, his father's visa expired. Well, his dad wanted his little boy, his little 12-year-old kid, to have the opportunities to live in the United States. So my grandfather's father went back to their old country. My grandfather, at the age of 12, was put on a train by himself from Chicago, Illinois, to Pasadena, California, to go
Whoa.
live with his mother's sister, an older woman that had never married. And she raised him as her own. So now He was first raised, had an intact family. Then he had a single dad. Now he's got a single mom. Okay. Well, and that's how we got to California. Okay. He grows up and everything, and he meets this. Now, granted, I'm ever so slightly biased, okay, but meets this beautiful nursing student. Okay. And she's, at a dance at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. Okay? And man, they were a sharp couple. Cuties. Okay. Well dressed. I mean, it's like, wow. Okay. Well, then this woman got polio. She had a whole bunch of suitors. When she got polio, they all left except one. My boy, George. They got married. They had 2 children. The oldest, 2 daughters, the oldest of which is my mother. And when my mother was 14 years old, her mom, who had been a emergency room pediatric nurse, passed away from breast cancer. So here's my Gramps. He is now a single dad of 2 young teenage girls. Never got married again. Like you said, the things you will do for your daughters. I was born 6 years later. To be very blunt, my birth father was in prison when I was born. And so that's why I have multiple names, and I've told my family I want my grandfather's last name on my grave marker. Because he always felt bad that he didn't have anybody to pass the name on to. When you're a kid, young and everything, but now that I'm an adult, I'm going, yeah, you do. And that's okay. See, now you're going to make me emotional, Shannon. So that's those stories. I mean, he was an incredible man. He went through so much. He was also an entrepreneur. He owned a furniture upholstery company, and so, he's a business owner and everything, but it's those things that we do for our family. And again, those stories need to be passed down from generation to generation. And I'll give you one last quick little story that I think that about Gramps that it would be interesting. Again, it's what happens after. This is a crazy one. Okay, you ready for you got to be kidding story again?
I'm ready for a doozy. Let's go.
Okay, this is a doozy. Okay. My grandfather never saw his dad again, but he did. But he did get letters, a couple. After my grandfather passed away, I inherited one of those letters, and it was in Swedish. Okay. And my wife and I, we had occasion to travel. And so we were going to be traveling to Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and everything. And so I brought a copy of that letter, and there were also 2 or 3 pictures inside that letter of my great grandfather. He had gotten remarried, and so here it is, old guy, in a house in the backyard with this, old lady that's his new wife. Then there's another picture of him having lunch on a hill with this really beautiful building in the back, but all these water and bridges and everything. It's here. Okay. So we traveled, and I'll tell you the country. It was Sweden. Okay. And you got to remember, this was, geez, 20, 30 years ago. It was a hell of a lot earlier than Google. Okay. There was no Google Maps. There was none of this stuff. But here's the crazy part. The return address was on that letter from 1930 something. Okay. Chances of this, and then we're in this country, chances of finding this are slim and none. Okay. I said a prayer. Says, okay, I need some inspiration here, people. And I felt impressed to go to a church. It's a Wednesday morning. Why in the world am I going to a church? Nobody's going to be there, blah, blah. Okay, fine. But I go, okay, so I drive out. Okay, I found a church. Okay. And, nobody's there, but there's this guy with a bicycle, a newspaper, drinking his morning beverage. Okay. And I come up to him, do you speak English? Yeah. Okay. I'm looking for an address, blah, 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 and this, it's okay. This flight by Gotten, literally, blah, 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 blah. Sun by Berg, Sweden. The guy looks up at me. I used to live in that neighborhood for 20 years.
Come on.
I did. I'm going, you got to be kidding. Wow. Okay. Can you take us there? Well, I got my bicycle here. Blah, blah, blah. I'm horrible at directions. Okay. Thank goodness my wife is an incredible navigator.
I am also horrible at directions.
Yeah. So we convinced this guy to get in a car with two Americans that he has no idea who the heck they are.
What a nice guy.
He says, okay, turn left and right. I'm going, there's no way in the world I'm going to be able to find it. He just says, give me back, So can we drive to this location? Okay. Okay. And we get there and I'm going, looking at the picture, I'm going, this might be it. Okay. So we then take this guy back and then go immediately back to make sure. And it was like a half hour. Okay. To make sure that we really get to this place. And I said, okay, so we're there. Okay. Now it's 10 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday. I have flown halfway around the world for this moment. Nobody's going to be there.
Yeah, it's 10 o'clock on a Wednesday. They're got jobs.
On the door, I hear some rustling. Somebody answers the door. Says, do you speak English? Yeah. Okay. I think this might be my great-grandfather's house. Really? What was his name? Frederick Emil Jonquist. The guy's eyes get big and say, wait here. Okay. He's gone for about 5 minutes. I hear wrestling. Okay. Comes back into the door. And in his hands are the original building permit for that house with my great-grandfather's signature. And then here's another bill of sale many years later with a very shaky signature of my great-grandfather. This guy was restoring the house. He let me come in, and there were stairs, wooden stairs that were worn, literally concave. Shannon, I got to step in the very footsteps of my great-grandfather. That is probably the most incredible experience of my entire life. And that's the reason that we do what we do, because those connections, the family heritage stories help us. Bluntly, I'm funding this thing, and I hate to say this, I'm running out of money. And so that's why we created this Fedora Foundation, But the idea is we want to help other people tell their stories. I mean, those are mine, and I don't share those very often, to be honest. But
well, thank you.
It's you can see why my whole mantra is the power of stories. It's just I've had such a blessed life to be able to interview hundreds, if not thousands of people of all walks of life, from janitors to CEOs, they all are the same. We all want to have a connection. And that is where, I'm grateful for what you guys do, because again, the one thing I love to do, and it's part of the Fedora Foundation as well, is, and see if this fits in with what you guys do. Okay. So I've done lots and lots of stories. And a lot of the time I was my moniker was the TV good news guy. I got to pick and choose on my own stories. I always did the positive because I got so tired of the negative. Mm-hmm. And we would do a lot of business profiles. It was called the success stories franchise that I do. Well, every once in a while I had a little break and everything. And I'm going, I got an idea. Is there somebody out there that has got a nonprofit that they really love? Nonprofits, every single one that I know has two major problems. Okay. Number one, they're most of the time, they are run by people extremely passionate about what they do. Okay. Mm-hmm. But they may or may not be so good at business, but they're very passionate about what they do. And how are more people supposed to be able to use their services if they don't know they exist? So number one, okay, it's visibility, And so here I am, a news guy. I'm going, okay, I want to come out to you, do a story. I want to give you credibility, but more importantly, I want to give you some tools to get things done. It was intriguing. I actually had to get corporate approval on this one. But I now do it on my own on Fedora Foundation and Family Heritage Stories because it's my show and do whatever I want. It was that in a news story, you have a snowball's chance in Hades of ever getting a copy of the story. I mean, it's, and it's not going to happen. I was able to arrange it and say, I'll underwrite these. And the idea is that, okay, let's interview this nonprofit and give them a copy. Because the second problem every nonprofit has is, as much as people think that, nonprofits are, great and wonderful and making gobs of money, no, they are not. Okay. They are barely hanging on. And how in the world are they supposed to raise money if nobody knows they exist?
Yep.
And so, bluntly, I appreciate you giving us the forum to be able to help people know that we exist, but it's the same thing. So now more people, if we do a story, more people know you exist. And now you can use it for this funding. And we call that segment in our show, the caring stories. So I've been doing that for a while.
I appreciate that sentiment so much, because that is at least what we're trying to do here, is showcase people's missions, because we noticed that we were working with so many nonprofits because we have this program where we provide design work for a very little for nonprofits, specifically because we understand, as you just mentioned, maybe not all of them are financially well, and many of them, even if they are okay, have one marketing member, if they even have one, doing all of their design work. Right. Yeah, maybe. And so we realized that was a problem, but we just had all of these people that we've worked with that, no one knew about. Like, we agreed that they had like amazing missions, and that's why, we worked with them in the first place. But we realized, like, there's so many people that could know so much about this. And my favorite part about the podcast, on top of that, is being able to connect nonprofits with each other, because so many times do I see that missions align so well, but one has never heard of another one. And the fact that they could work together, I just love building community. And this podcast has been such a lovely way to be able to do that as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for what you do.
Thank you for what you do. We do have to cut this short because we're so over time, but in the best way possible.
That's not a surprise. Okay. We got two chatty people. Okay.
Yeah, we got two chatty Cathys up here, I think. But this was so wonderful. I really appreciate. I know I cried a lot, but it's a good cry. They were all good cries. I am so happy that someone is doing what you do, and to hear all the stories that you shared about your family, really really inspiring and made me think a lot about mine too, which I'm always thankful for any day that I'm, you know, able to think about them and be reminded of them. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It was a pleasure to meet you, and thank you everyone for watching. We'd be nothing without you as well, so I hope that you can check out the Fedora Foundation in the description. It will be there if you guys want to check it out, and if you want to check out other episodes to learn like I get to, I'd really appreciate that too. Thank you guys.